Hey folks, old Texas Paul here. And I think it's about time we had a serious talk about gun violence. Now I've talked to you folks before, and I like my guns, and I'm the founder of Ride or Die Democrats. I'm not some right winger. I can tell you how we can end mass shootings, almost all mass shootings, today, and it would cost almost nothing. That's not hyperbole. It's not a joke. It's not a hook. It's just a fact. Just stick with me and you'll understand. And we can do it without taking people's rights away. First of all, you have to understand mass shootings. There are different types of mass shootings. There are school shootings, there are workplace shootings, there are shootings like the one in Buffalo that were race related. You had some sicko, racist bastard piece of shit that was buying into, I actually mentioned Fox News in his manifesto, Tucker Carlson, and their right-wing bull. There are different types of mass shootings, and in those different types of mass shootings, there are different facts. But in all mass shootings, there are four things that are absolutely 100% true, and then there's a fifth thing that is true 99.9999% of the time. Fortunately, when it comes to violence, we've got groups and organizations such as the FBI and other private groups that study these things, and we actually have data, universities, whatnot. We know what causes these shootings. We know about the shooters. We know about their lives. No matter the type of mass shooting, there are four things that are 100% always there. First is that they had some sort of trauma, abuse, or neglect earlier in their life. The second thing is that they are in a crisis at the time of the shooting and are suicidal. The third thing is that they've got a history with guns. A history of guns meaning that they were hunting, they used to do, were involved in target shooting, former soldiers, people that have just grown up with guns or have knowledge of guns. The fourth thing is the thing that most people don't know about, and both sides fail you in telling you about, is the script. And you know me, folks, I hate both sidism. I've actually blocked people from my TikTok account and stuff like that for both sidism. Well, this is actually one case where both Democrats and Republicans are failing us, and I've got the receipts to back it up. They all have a script. And when they do an investigation of these events, they do what they call a crime scene script. And what that means is every mass shooter has worked out in their head, even if it's spontaneous, has worked out in their head their targets, what weapons they're going to use. They've worked out in their head the clothing they're going to wear, whether it be bulletproof vests, tactical gear, long black dusters, or whatever it is, they've gone through their head. And then they've played the scenario out in their mind of how this is all going to break down. The script is what I want to talk to you about first, because it is the one thing that we can, without a doubt, without cost, without anything, we can short circuit that portion of every mass shooting and prevent it from happening. Let's start there. The one that costs us nothing, the one that we can easily change, and the one that nobody ever addresses. The script begins with using a weapon against another human being as a means of resolution. That needs to change. That needs to change. That whole idea needs to change. And my Democrats, if we put as much time and energy into changing that narrative as we did into trying to take guns away from people, we would have already prevented a huge number of mass shootings. I mean, we will do more good there than we will ever do trying to take people's guns away. Because like I said, I'm a Democrat, and the vast majority of Democrats out there own guns and don't want to give them up. You're not going to pass gun control laws where you confiscate people's guns. Their guns will always be out there. So my Democrats, I'm telling you, if you really want to end gun violence, you really want to stop these mass shootings, I am telling you, stop with the gun control Tourette's. And I'm not making fun of people with Tourette's when I say that. Don't, so stop your email now. Stop your gun control Tourette's and start focusing on the narrative, what guns are for. My people on the right, that are not my people. You people on the right, let me tell you something. You need to change your narrative. Let me tell you a little story. I went in to buy a Kalashnikov the other day, an AK-47. The guy and I were talking about it, the guy at the gun counter, and we were talking about ballistics. And he was really trying to sell me into an AR-15, and I don't particularly like AR-15s. I like Kalashnikovs. I like AKs. I do. To me, they're just a better weapon. If you buy a well-made one, that's stamped properly, and you'll get a better weapon out of an AK than you will an AR-15. I enjoy shooting them more. To me, they're more tunable, and yada, 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 not important. But anyways, during this conversation, we started talking about ballistics. And he was telling me, oh boy, man, the ballistics on the AR, you need to really think about that. Penetration, man, penetration. You really want that AR, because if you end up shooting somebody in the plate, the 5.56 has a much better chance of penetrating than the 7.62. And I walked away right there. I said, well, thanks, I appreciate you, bye. And I really should have just torn him a new ass about it, but I just was so revolted by it. I am never going to shoot a human being, much less a human being wearing a bulletproof vest. And this guy is selling, as a selling point, shooting people through their bulletproof vest. Now think about that. Think about that for a minute. Gun crime, even though it's emotionally horrible, really is a pretty rare unicorn when you talk about actually saving people's lives. If you pushed a good fitness program and got fat asses like me to start exercising more, you'd actually save more lives than you would, ever doing anything about gun violence, because it's a pretty rare unicorn, actually. We may have the most in the world here in the USA, but it's still not as more people die in car wrecks than from gun violence. I mean, it's not our number one problem, but it is very much emotionally a big problem with us, because it's violence. It's something that shouldn't be happening. We have to drive. We don't have to get shot. But my people on the right, you talk about guns like they're anti-personnel devices. And that's the problem. That's the root of the problem. I grew up with guns. I've grown up shooting. I guarantee you I can outshoot. I will take any one of you on. I will. Let's go to the range. I guarantee you. I'll shoot against you. You choose the shooting sport. I will shoot against you, from sporting clays all the way to sniping. You want to go 600 yards, 800 yards, 1,000 yards? Let's do it. But I never, ever, ever have considered any of my guns to be anti-personnel devices. Never. And that is the problem. That is the root, the core, the base of the problem. I don't mean to sound, keep repeating myself, but I need to drive this point home. Okay? Let's talk about back in the day. You folks like to talk about nostalgia and whatnot. When I was a kid, guns were around. Hell, they were in the back. Everybody had one hanging in the back window of their pickup. You know, we went through gun training. There were gun classes at schools. My wife and I were talking about this, you know, taking gun shooting classes at school. And you know what they taught us? Keep that safety on. Why? You don't want to hurt anybody with this gun. They taught us how to clear the chamber, you know. Make sure, look into that chamber, make sure that there isn't a bullet in there. Why? So that you don't hurt anybody with this gun. That was the overarching message. When I was competing, we had massive amounts of rules. Why? So that you didn't hurt anyone with your gun. It was just driven home repeatedly. You couldn't, unless you were on the firing line, unless you were, you know, in the box, if you're shooting sporting clays, you could not have your weapon loaded. Why? So no one got hurt. The guns never were for hurting people. And nowadays, look how much that's changed. I mean, ladies, let's talk about y'all for a second, because y'all are completely not responsible for gun violence. You know, if you look at the real numbers, and Democrats, we love to look at real numbers. And that's why you need to hang with me on this, because this is reality talking. If you look at the real numbers, women do not commit gun violence. It almost does not exist. It's always men. But what's the new narrative? You know, you used to talk about keeping keys in your knuckles. You used to talk about mace, having mace available to you. Now how do they sell it? With fear. You need a purse gun. You need your pink Smith & Wesson. You know, why? What is that gun for? Oh yeah, to shoot somebody with. Somebody, a person. And that is the root of the problem. All of the sales these days, you know, everybody's freaking about assault rifles, okay? Assault rifles aren't used very often in mass shootings. Surprise, surprise. They're not. They're very, very rarely used in gun violence, and they're never used in gun suicides. Yet we waste so much energy on them. Why? Because the sales pitch is, you're going to use this to kill other people. Look at Lauren Boebert, that frickin' idiot. Marjorie Taylor Greene, look at that idiot. They all take pictures and they talk about shooting people, you know, and they talk about just horrible things, you know. I was driving down the road the other day, another story. I was driving down the road. The guy had a sticker in the back of his window that said something about pedophile control service. And it had a stick figure of a guy on his knees and another stick figure with a guy with a gun on the back of his head. You're not entitled to execute anyone. Not even a pedophile. As gross as that is, you're not entitled to execute people. And we don't say that enough in this country. In fact, more often than not, the companies selling guns are preaching executing people. And that's the problem. That's why so many people in their script, when they go into crisis, turn to guns to solve problems. And that's what a mass shooting is. It is someone in pain, someone in crisis, someone that is suicidal, solving a problem in their own mind. And they go to the gun because they always hear the gun is there to solve that problem. It's okay to shoot people. If we change that narrative, we can end almost all mass shootings and a good deal of the gun violence. The other thing that we need to consider in this, one of the other pillars that are so important, is the first one. The trauma, the early trauma and abuse or neglect. That needs to be screened for. That needs to be screened for early. Because remember, a mass shooter or somebody that commits violence is somebody, forgive the dog, is somebody that has experience with guns and early trauma or neglect. Again, I apologize for the dogs. What we can do is very easily, with questionnaires, ask people, school children. We know for a fact we don't need to screen the girls. They're not the ones responsible for this. But young men, in junior high and early high school, and we can screen them and say, just ask basic questions. Are you familiar with guns? Do you use guns? Are you trained to use guns? Do you hunt? Because we know that's where our shooters come from, are those people that own weapons, people that we don't. So think about that. We've eliminated 50% of the society, and you can eliminate another 20 to 30% by just screening them, because a lot of people just don't have a lot of experience with guns, and they're not going to be the ones that are grow up to be your mass shooters. Let's be realistic about this, folks. Even people that own guns, I'll tell you another story. There was a shooting in the Starfield Methodist Church, not far from here, in a little town called Winona. Pastor, by all accounts, wonderful human being. So this being Texas, and he bought into the yeehaw, yahoo bullshit about carrying guns solving problems. The problem is he wasn't a killer. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. But he fell into the narrative that he was going to use his gun to solve the problem when he wasn't a killer. And this goes for you ladies carrying those purses and your guns in your purses. You may be carrying your gun to your murder. Criminal that was on the run ran into his church. They found out he went into the church. He grabbed his gun, and a buddy of his grabbed his gun, and his wife went in there. They confronted the guy in the bathroom. The pastor was not a killer. The guy they confronted was. He took the pastor's gun. He shot the pastor. He shot the friend that was with him that was also armed, who was also not a killer, but armed. And he took a shot at the pastor's wife, who jumped and hit the floor, and she injured herself, but she was not shot. Then the guy ran out and ran for it and was later apprehended. You need to think about that, folks. I know violence. You can take a look at me. The scars. Oops. This is where you veterans, I really want you to chime into the comments. We're not all killers. And if you buy into that narrative to get a gun to solve your problem, and you try to use your gun to solve your problem, whether it's road rage or whatever it is, and you're not a killer, you pretty good chance just brought your gun and handed it to your murderer. The other thing is suicides. That's the number one use for a gun you purchase, as far as gun violence is concerned. 24,000 people last year took their own lives. More people took their own lives with their guns than committed gun violence against another human being last year. There was 20,000 people last year that were victims of gun violence. But more people shot themselves. Again, going to that first pillar, the mental health screening. Because if we can bolster our mental health services, and this is where I'm talking to my Democrats, if you can really push for that mental health care and really sell that, I'm in this to win elections. One, stop talking about gun control. You can't pass it won't work. But you can start attacking that narrative, and it will work. Two, let's start screening for people that are prone to violence and gun violence. We can do that, and let's start providing mental health care in this country. Now, that's not a quick fix. That's not a cheap fix. Qualified counselors don't grow on trees. We have to focus, and this is where the government can get involved. And you right-wingers, this is where you're the problem. That the government is bad stuff, and we can't have health care and stuff like that. You need to cut that shit out. If you really want to end gun violence and end the conversation about people taking your guns away and all that kind of bullshit, then you need to get behind mental health care and changing our narrative surrounding guns. Let's go back to the good old days when guns were for sport. When the joy of guns was watching somebody put on an exhibition. I remember seeing one of the most awe-inspiring things I ever saw in my life was a guy with a pump shotgun that held 6 slugs through 10 targets in the air, 10 clay pigeons up in the air, shot 6, loaded 4 bullets, and shot the other 4 before they hit the ground. It was one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. But again, there was no talk about shooting each other. I'm serious, folks. If you're serious about ending gun violence, if you are serious about ending gun violence, you look at the numbers. You look at what really causes mass shootings and violence, whether it's workplace or not. Change the narrative. Never, ever, ever sell a gun to be used on another human being again. I know you right-wingers are saying, blah, 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 and the manufacturers are going to be freaking out because, fear sells. That's why they're selling these AR-15s that way, that you're never going to use. They sell them with fear. And they're going to be the hardest ones to beat, but we can beat them. If you, the customer, do what I did, the minute that guy started talking about that Kalashnikov being used on another human being, I turned around and walked away from the counter. We can do this, people. We can do this. And it will cost us nothing in the beginning, and it will take effect immediately if we just change the narrative and then invest long-term in screening in schools, because we know who it is. We know who's doing these shootings. We can target that group and not target them in a bad way. I mean, think about how much better someone's life would be if when they're young, they're being abused at home, if we could get them the mental health care that they need. We can intervene and make everyone's life better. Everyone's, And I'm going to bring one more thing up that's just going to make everybody on the left gasp. Let's get shooting back in schools. I know you're going to think that's just counterintuitive as hell. It really is. But when we took those shooting classes, if we had somebody that was a poor influence, that shooting class was the way in to the mind. It was that moment to intercede, to teach them that guns are not for killing people. Guns are for sport. They're for fun. They're for hunting. And God knows if everything in the world went wrong, the gun would be there, but that's not what it's for. Keep your safety on so you don't hurt anybody. Let's do that. Let's just make it, everybody put your safety on. Thanks for hearing me out, and I hope you're ready to help me. Love you guys.